This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now, let's kick off the Extra Point.
Hey, welcome to the Extra Point. I'm Cheryl Ross, the Next Steps in Discipleship pastor here at Southward Church, and I'm with Scott Beha, our lead pastor. And we are in week 3 of our series, Rise and Fall. But before we get into it, I just want to make sure that if you haven't liked or subscribed to this podcast, that you go ahead and do so. That way you don't miss out on any new content. And make sure to share this with somebody so that way they may be able to have some practical next steps for their faith journey as well. But we're in week 3 of Rise and Fall, and you shared from chapter 4 of 1 Samuel. This is a series where we're going through the book of 1 Samuel, at least 1 Samuel, and you shared this text to help us to realize that there are things that we need to do that often we don't want to do or we don't do that stands in the way of God's blessing. So briefly, just share with us a little bit more about that idea.
Yeah, so the main idea was that we cannot expect God to bless us when we're being unfaithful to Him.
Right.
And now, I think the thing that I didn't do a great job of Sunday is helping people understand kind of the New Testament view of that, since we were preaching it from the Old Testament, which is, and this is what I hope came across, but I understand that sermons like this can create confusion and questions, that God can do whatever He wants. That's just, so God blesses people that are unfaithful. God blesses people that don't even acknowledge Him. He gets to do whatever He wants. The point of the message was God also will stand in your way for your own good if you're being unfaithful, and that it's very disingenuous of someone who says they're a Christian to try to manipulate God into blessing them if they're not willing to pay the price of faithfulness.
Right. So
that doesn't mean that you can, because again, it's I had a question after service. Well, what do I have to do for this to happen? It goes, no, you're thinking about this wrong.
Right.
You can't do anything
to
force God's hand. He acts upon His own divine will however He sees fit. The point of this message was make sure that you're not the one standing in the way.
Right.
If He wants to do it, make sure that you are not standing in the way of it. And so that's what we were talking about. And I know it could come across, if you listen to it, a little bit like prosperity type, like, oh, if you do the right stuff, God. Right. No. You may do all the right stuff, and your life still may not turn out how you hope.
Yeah.
But here's what I wish I had gotten around to on Sunday that it hit me yesterday or this morning. In all of our lives, if we're serious about following the Lord, the blessing is always obedience. That's like it's not if anything ever comes about. That's the blessing. Like how many people have been obedient to the Lord and gone, oh man, I really wish I hadn't done that.
Right.
It's like nobody. The blessing is obedience. Now God may go above and beyond blessing you with all sorts of things, and whatever it is. What was it? Proverbs 4:23. Yeah, Proverbs 4:23. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He'll give you the desires of your heart. Again, that's not a promise. That's a principle. It means that if you want to set yourself up for the opportunity for God to give you the desires of your heart, you have to delight yourself in Him.
Right.
Not saying that He will. The desire of your heart might be something that's not good for you.
Right.
It might be something that's going to lead to your destruction, so He's not going to do it. But again, you don't want to be the one to stand in the way. And so that's what I wanted to, this is what was happening in this story.
Right.
Israel thinks that they can manipulate God into bringing victory when they have a corrupt priesthood.
Right.
And they are not holding their leaders accountable whatsoever. Eli is not holding his sons accountable. Yeah. The nation in general has gone after Baal and Ashtaroth and these other foreign gods. They are an absolute disaster. And yet they think, well, we're the people of God, so therefore God should just show up and fix this.
Yeah.
There's no hook in God's mouth to make him do that whatsoever.
Yeah.
He is not forced to bless you at all. So make sure you're not the one standing in the way, and then be ready to accept whatever the answer is.
Yeah.
Right? Because it may be for your good that he keeps you in that situation. I was watching a TV show this morning, and the episode, it happens at a hospital, and the episode was talking, there was a doctor who was an atheist. There was one of the nurses who was a person of faith in the show, and the doctor's giving this lady a really hard time about her faith, like, because there was an 8-year-old little girl who had gotten something wrong with her, and he's like, you explain that, with your faith and all of this stuff. And the little girl has to go in for a CT scan, and they end up finding a tumor that ends up saving her life.
Yeah.
And she goes, that's how I'd explain it, just like that.
Right. And
then she turns it around on that doctor the next day, because he's like, decided, I'm going to destroy your faith. And he had just had a baby on the show, or he was getting ready to have a baby on the show, and his wife had to have prenatal surgery. And she said, your wife just had to have prenatal surgery, but ever since then, how has your all's relationship been? He goes, it's better than it's ever been. Right? So it's like, make sure you're not the one standing in the way, and then be okay with whatever the answer is, because the blessing may come not through healing, but it may be through the drawing together of a relationship, or a renewing of a relationship, or the opening of a new door to pursue a different opportunity that you didn't even see that was on the table. And so when we're talking about God blessing us, we shouldn't be just looking linear.
Yeah.
Right? Like, sometimes there's just a blessing in struggling because it makes you rely on God.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, just change our mindset about, it's like, oh, you said that if we put the Lord first in our finances, he'll bless us. Yeah, but I didn't say he'd bless you financially. He could, and he's more likely to increase your finances if you'll be faithful with what you have. But he may also increase your relationships as the result of your financial faithfulness. Because it may be that he's not going to bless you financially, but the struggle of struggling financially is going to bring you and your husband, or you and your wife, you and your kids closer together. You don't know how the blessing might come. Just make sure you're not the one standing in the way. That's the whole point. And Israel was standing in the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I found it interesting because you talked about how Israel's enemy had more faith in God than they did themselves. And the only thing that them bringing the ark in to the battle was it gave Israelites false confidence, right? But then it motivated those that they were up against. And I thought, how many times in our lives might we see people who don't believe the same way as us, but they actually have more faith than what we do? How might we see that actually in our lives with people around us?
It's like, because so many people that call themselves Christians have settled for some sort of religious experience, religiosity or something, where it's like all signs and symbols but never actual substance.
Yeah.
A lot of times you will find people further away from God that get it more, or at least can point out the inconsistency in people like that they go like, hey, aren't you supposed to be the one that's like optimistic about this situation because of the faith that you have? Like, there's people like that, and you go, oh yeah, we are supposed to be like the most optimistic people about our situation because of all that God has done and can do and will do. And you run into that. The Philistines are sitting there; they're the ones remembering the great acts of God. I think that if Israel had remembered the great acts of God in their camp, they wouldn't have tried to manipulate God, but rather they would have turned to that God and repented of their idolatry, and then he would have shown up.
Yeah.
And he would, because under that covenant that they were in. This is why I said it's hard to preach Old Testament narrative in this way, because we are also under a different covenant. See, the covenant Israel had, and you can't just make the same conclusions from the Old Testament to the New Testament. The covenant that they had was a blessing and curse sort of covenant. They had a relationship with God where God said, yes, if you keep up your side of this, then I will lead you to the promised land and give you victory and these things like that. And if you don't, then I will absolutely oppose you.
Yeah.
And so they should have known that if they really wanted victory, that's all they had to do was turn and be faithful. But just like I was talking about on Sunday, that's always the one thing that we don't want to do.
Right.
We don't want, that's the hard thing, to go, okay, I messed up. How do I fix this? How do I get back on good terms with you? Whatever it is, that's the hard thing, but we always want a shortcut. And for them, that was the Ark of the Covenant, which for like a lot of people in our day and age, it's like, I'll talk to people, especially because as a pastor, for some reason, anytime I talk to someone that I haven't seen, like if I know them from a church context, every time I see them, they immediately go, I know. And I didn't even ask them about, hey, you going to come back to church? They'll immediately go, I know. I got to get back in church. I got to get back in church. And he goes, I'd like to explore that with you. Why is it that you feel a need to get back in church? Because what I think that you really mean is that you need to get Jesus back in you.
Right.
Because I had a blog whenever I was writing a long time ago called Stop Saying Church When We Should Actually Say Jesus. Because there's so many people that think that the church is the answer. And it's like, no. The church will only further your problems if you don't allow the Jesus of that church to be the one that actually fixes you.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like, oh, you know what I need? I need to get back in church. Yeah. No, you need to get more Jesus. And as the result of getting more Jesus, he will probably lead you to the church, to a place to be fed and nourished and discipled and held accountable. But what you need is Jesus, not a religious experience. Once you have Jesus, then your religious experience makes sense and it can be fruitful. But if you try to put the cart before the horse, this is why I see so many people, they'll have bad marriages, they'll have health issues, they'll have legal issues, and they'll show up and they'll be like, yeah, church is going to fix this. And then maybe God does bless them, and then like, poof, they forget all about God and go, oh, come on, guys, that's not what we're doing here whatsoever. Yeah. And so, their enemy had more faith, and all they had to do was the one thing that they didn't want to do, which was repent. Yeah. And for a lot of us, I know me personally, I talked to Sunday about my health journey and what a struggle it's been, and a lot of that has just been making excuses and not doing the things that we absolutely know fix the problem. But it's the hardest thing. It's the absolute hardest thing.
It's a lifestyle change. It's a mindset change.
Exactly.
It's all of that. It's not just about the doing. It's seeing yourself as that person who does these things and then being that person. And it's the same thing in our spiritual life. It's if I say I'm a follower of Jesus, it's not just saying it, right? It's seeing myself as that person and doing the things that make me that person. Yeah. And I think that's like a big difference that we see a lot of times is that we just like we focus on the task. Yeah. We focus on the, whatever, rather than actually like shifting our mindset and our lifestyle to be this person. Yeah. Like, and I don't know, but you also talked about how we can often put blame. We want to put blame on everyone else, everything else. We don't want to accept the responsibility for what's going on in our lives. And so often we try to like go somewhere else, or, we think, well, God's moving here, so I'll go to this other church, or, this is still happening here, so I'll go over here. But like often we just take those problems with us, because we go wherever we go. And if often we're the problem, right, we just take that with us.
Yeah, I heard that from Andy Stanley. And he said every time you try to run away from the problem is everywhere you go, you go. There you are. And if you're the problem, you like, okay, so you came to this church because your last church was the problem, and then you get here and you go, oh my goodness, this church is the problem too. So you go and you'll go 3, 4, 5, 6 churches, and never once will someone go, I can't believe there's that many bad churches. And not once would they go, maybe I'm the problem. Right. It's like people are on their 5th marriage, and it's like, all these people, they were so terrible. And it's like, hey, the common denominator in all those marriages that didn't work was you. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like everywhere you go, you go,
and even maybe with that, it's that settling that you talked about. Like even within that, sometimes we want that so bad, and we think we'll just jump into this because I'll get married. I'll fix him. Like, I'm a Christian. So, like, I see this with young people, and I mean old people too. Like, they want that relationship so bad that they settle in what they actually should be looking for. And then it's not good because they didn't actually follow what they should have done. I've done this in my own life. Like, when I dated a guy who I knew wasn't a Christian, like, I knew that I shouldn't go out with him. All the terrible things that happened in that relationship, well, that was, he did things he shouldn't have. But, like, also, I entered that relationship knowing that was not going to be a good relationship for me. Because we believed two different things. We were trying to live two different lives. Like, so I can't blame God for those things when, in fact, I was the one who did something I knew I shouldn't do in the first place, and I settled for something that wasn't his best. And I think that we do that in so many areas of our life. Like, it goes back to that settling or not really not waiting and trusting God in the process. I think it's in that obedience of
something that's been so difficult in ministry for me, working with people, is the lack of self-awareness in people's lives. And you go, and it's so hard because everyone lives offended, and everyone immediately wants to run to do not judge, do not judge, do not judge. And so it's hard to address when someone else is, like, when you're the issue. It's hard because you can't see it. Like, I've had people at church, and they'll be like, they'll say nasty stuff about, like, our group's ministry. I don't want to get into a group. They're all cliques. They're all this. I've tried this, and this, and I go, I've never felt comfortable, even though maybe I should at some point, and just go, hey, just so you know, the reason why those groups haven't worked for you is because you're an unbelievably difficult person. You're not a kind and welcoming and generous person yourself. So therefore, it's impossible. Like, you actually don't have enough self-awareness to see you're the reason why those friendships are not working. You're the problem, and nobody feels comfortable enough to tell you that because you're so, honestly, so immature in a lot of ways. And it's hard. Like, I used to have this guy in ministry. He wanted to do these certain types of ministry, and he just couldn't understand why nobody wanted to do this ministry with him. Why he would organize this stuff and nobody would sign up. And he never once stopped to pause to think, maybe no one wants to go on this trip with me, or no one wants to be in this ministry with me because of me. Because I'm a difficult, nasty person to deal with, and nobody wants to be around someone like that. Like, that's what's so hard, the lack of self-awareness to just go, and this is what Israel's going. Israel goes, oh, it was God's fault. It's God's fault. Or, you know, for us, oh, it's my husband's fault, it's my wife's fault, it's my kid's fault, it's their coach's fault, it's
my boss's
whatever it is,
fault.
it's my boss's fault, it's the pastor's fault, all this, and you go, it may be, and I'm not saying that sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is your spouse. Sometimes it is your kids. Sometimes it is the coach or your boss or your pastor. I'm not saying it's not. And I'm not saying, oh, just sit down, shut up, and fix yourself. And no, sometimes there needs to be tough conversations. But before you go have that tough conversation, you need to make sure that you're not the problem. And once you have sought wise counsel, talk to people that won't just parrot back to you what you want to hear, but people that will give you a bag full of hard truths, then you're ready to go have that difficult conversation. But you cannot act like it's somebody else's fault until you have first examined how you have contributed to the unhealthiness of the situation whatsoever. And so don't, like, it. That's the hardest part, I think, of being human, is coming to grips with the fact that we don't actually have it all together, and not allowing that to send us down a spiral into a deep-seated depression or a lack of self-confidence or self-image, but rather being able to see yourself accurately like God sees you, that will draw you into those relationships that can help heal you. And Israel is it's always like I had this little baseball player. He's my best pitcher. Week in, week out, he's probably one of the best 10-year-old kids in the state. He had a really bad day one day, and he was just melting down about it. And I went out and talked to him. I said, "Hey, what's going on?" Because he's always so sharp. He says the mound is too small. I said, "So you're having a bad day because of that mound, right?" Yeah. I said, "Well, here's the problem. I can't change that mound, and neither can you. You're stuck playing on that all weekend. So either you have to change something about you to make it work, or you can keep saying it's the mound's fault, and you're going to continue to struggle. It's that simple. But I can't change the mound. You can't change the mound. This ain't our field. This ain't our tournament. I can't change the mound. So you have to deal with that adversity and change yourself.
Yeah.
What do you have to do to adjust?" And I know you're 10 years old. That's tough to do. But you learn how to do it as a 10-year-old. And that's why I tell Landon all the time. So son, this is why we play sports. It's not the way we can win $3 championship rings, even though that's fun and cool for them.
Yeah.
I said it's the way you understand that there are like difficult things that you're going to face in life, and this is an arena to help you learn and to grow and to get ready for those things. And so I talk to my team all the time because they'll be like, "Oh, it was his fault. It was her fault. It was the umpire's fault." Nope, not at all. It may be, but until you own your part of it, then you have no onus on you whatsoever to get better and to get fixed. Had Israel seen what the real problem was, hey, we've got a corrupt priesthood. We've been unfaithful to the covenant that we made with God. Fix that, and the whole situation would have been different.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this story too is that like literally like the elders there, they didn't come up with that either.
Nope.
And I think it's important of who you're going to, who you're asking those questions to, because you said like, hey, sit down with somebody, talk it through. You don't just go spouting to anybody all your gossip and all the stuff that like, I'm dealing with so-and-so and they're doing this. Like, it's about who you're asking those questions to.
Because you know how you're going to do it. You're going to go and tell your side of how things went. And when they hear it, they're going to go, "Oh, yeah, you are in the right. You are in the right. It is their fault." And you go, no, that's not the conversation that's going to lead to this whatsoever. You need someone that's going to go, "Is that really how it happened? Are you sure that's how? Actually, let's bring somebody else in to make sure that that's how that happened." Because we tell stories that align with our narrative that we want. So we're going to make ourselves look good. We're going to make the other people look bad in that to boost up ourselves the way whoever we do go to. Then we can go, "Oh, see, I went and I talked to someone and they said it was you also." Yeah. Right? Like it's like no, because you ever been confronted about someone and they go, "And Cheryl agrees with me." And you're like, "Well, wait a second, talk to Cheryl, and Cheryl's your best friend." I'd love to hear the version of that story Cheryl heard before she said that she agrees with you. Right. So I bet it's the one that paints me into the bad guy and you into the hero. Let me tell my side of the story and then see what Cheryl has to say about it. Because I've heard that so many times. "Oh, yeah, and so agrees with me." Yeah. All kinds of people agree with me.
Or like all kinds of people feel this way. And I'm like, "Well, who?" And they can't.
Let's put some
sometimes
names
they can't tell you one name. And it's like, well, do they really? Because.
Yeah. No, they don't.
They
do not. So it's the hardest part in life and ministry will always be getting adults to be adults.
Yep. Because something that I know to be true is aging's inevitable, but maturing is not. No. Maturing is hard.
And I'm talking to myself.
Right
now. I know that so like whenever y'all hear us talking like this, it's not like me and Cheryl are some self-aware, well-developed species of humans that like I do the same crap. Yeah. I will fall in the same way.
Listen, I was talking to my husband last night. Yesterday, we were on our way to go see family, and we're driving, and I say something, and I'm sharing about whatever, and he came up. I was like, I couldn't figure out the word, and it had to do with writing. And my husband is like even more of a reader than I am, and he goes, "Is this?" And I go, "That's it." And he goes, "Why didn't you ask me?" And I said, I don't know. He said, I am here to be your helper. Like, you could come to me about this stuff. You could ask me to get the stuff off the high shelf. And I was like, oh, thank you so much for calling me out because I could have. Like, but you need those people who will call you out on those things.
You do.
Too.
And as long as you're in the right relationship with them, then you'll know that it's always for your good.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, like, you can have really difficult conversations with people where there is mutual love, and difficult conversations where there is not mutual love and mutual respect go horribly.
Yes.
But if you're in the right relationships, then someone can hold you to account.
Yeah.
Just like it's like that story of Jesus and the lady caught in adultery. Somehow you can feel fully loved and fully accountable simultaneously if it's in the context of the right relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what Israel needed. They never got there.
Right. Awesome. All right. Well, this next week we'll be in another part of 1 Samuel for our Rise and Fall series and give you some more practical next steps for your faith journey. Again, make sure that you like and subscribe and share this so that way you can help other people take their next steps in their faith journey as well. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.